It's a new year, which means it's time for New Year's resolutions, and I have two big ones. First, I'm gonna try to like the color purple. I know, as a quilter, it's almost a requirement, but don't worry, I'm working on it. And secondly, I'm gonna get much better at paper piecing. So tonight's quilt combines traditional piecing with paper piecing and shows that they can both live in harmony. And so that you can be a great paper piecer as well, I have a bonus video that will give you tips and tricks to make you the best paper piecer that ever pieced a paper pieced quilt. Say that 3 times fast. The quilt that I'm gonna work on is called Rising Star by Nancy Smith. And as you can tell, it uses purple fabric, so I'm gonna go ahead and get right into this. I'm gonna cut the fabric I need for the first block. So I have my purple, but thankfully there's some other colors to ease this transition for me. Gonna need a little bit of blue. Let's see that one. And then, oh, that's a pretty yellow. It's bright and sunny. So I'm gonna set these little pretties aside and get cutting on these fabrics to make my first block. All right, the first fabric I'm gonna cut is this purple fabric. Now I should say it's not that I hate the color, it's just when it comes to picking fabrics, it's not the first one I go for. I mean, it's not as though I have a problem with other purple things. Okay, maybe some purple is fine. But these are actually gonna be the points of my Rising Star that I'm gonna paper piece. I don't even know, how big is this piece of fabric? I mean, I'm gonna try to like purple, but not this much purple. So I just need some little rectangles to paper piece with. And I'm gonna cut those out real fast. And what's nice is I'm actually using these for paper piecing, so I'm cutting them a little larger than they need to be. So if they're not perfectly cut, it's not as important as if they were part of a traditionally pieced part of the block. And this little yellow piece, I just need a couple rectangles out of here. A couple more squares and I'm almost ready to start piecing that first block. All right, I have all my pieces cut for that first block. I'm gonna go ahead and get started with the paper piecing. Now we're finally to the paper piecing portion of this video. And every star needs some points, and that's what we're gonna paper piece in this quilt tonight. Now here, I've printed out my pattern, and the reason why I love paper piecing is it's gonna help me get those nice, sharp points. And so even if it uses a little bit more fabric, it makes the quilt look really closer to perfect than what I can do by cutting out those triangles and sewing them together. And I figure I can always buy more fabric, but I can't always buy more brain power. I mean, if that were the case, think of all the stuff I could do. I could finally throw a spiral football. But anyway, what I'm gonna do is talk through how to make this, but if you're newer to paper piecing or a little bit scared of it like I used to be, I have a free bonus video with more in-depth tips and tricks so that you can get more comfortable with it. Now, if you wanna check that out now, you can head down to the description box below, and there's more information on where to find that. And since you're already down there, you can subscribe to these videos as well. Now I've already printed out some of my pattern pieces. What's great about this pattern is that it's really easy to assemble. It's the same block over and over and over again, so I'm gonna be really good at this shape by the time I'm done. I've also printed it out on special foundation piecing paper. It might not look much different on camera, but it's actually easier to rip out, and that's important when we finally get to that step. Now I have my other fabric cut out into pieces, and what I want to point out is they are a little oversized for the pattern. Now I know myself, I know that I tend to make silly mistakes. This is going to give me just a little bit of wiggle room so that I don't have to rip out any of the piecing that I've done. So this is going to be for step 1, and these other pretty purples are going to be step 2 and 3. All right, so I'm gonna get the first piece ready, and I'm gonna flip it over and see this batik is nice and big, so it's going to cover that whole square. Again, I know it's overkill, I understand, but I know how I like to work. So I'm gonna look for step 2, and what I'm gonna do is just bend and fold on that line just as a visual representation of where I need to add my next piece of fabric. That just really helps me kind of know where that piece is gonna go. And then I'm gonna take my next piece, and I'm gonna overlap it over that fold by 1/4 of an inch or so. I wanna make sure that there's enough overlap that I don't accidentally not sew on that line, which is never good as well. Trust me, when it comes to paper piecing, I feel like I've made every mistake that can be made with this. So I went ahead and already switched out to a new needle on my sewing machine. Another bad habit of mine is leaving the same needle in there forever. And so I have a nice sharp new needle that's gonna help it go through that batik fabric and that paper. And I personally prefer a titanium coated needle because it makes it last a little bit longer. I've also shortened my stitches. That way, when it comes time to rip out the fabric, it's gonna perforate that paper just a little bit more, which is always nice. And I'm gonna just sew right on the line. That's what I really love about paper piecing. Once I get to this point, it's pretty mindless. I just have to follow that line. Now this is why I like a machine that has a thread cutter, because I could just easily cut that and pull it over. And that's the first step. It doesn't look too pretty yet, but it will. Well, what I need to do is trim all this extra fabric because I don't want to have that bulking up my block. So I'm going to carefully fold my paper back, make sure that it's just excess fabric that I'm cutting off, and I'm just going to give that a quick trim and then get ready to press. And you could use a rotary cutter or scissors, but when we get into these kind of things, I like to use the rotary cutter, make sure it's nice and crisp. So before I can move on to my next part, I need to press this seam. And the thing is, I'll be pressing this a lot in between each seam. So instead of using an iron each time, I do like to use a seam roller. Okay, the thing about batiks is they're printed on a more tightly woven fabric, so it really holds its shape. So using that seam roller is gonna keep it out of the way, almost as good as if I had pressed it. If you decide to press it though, make sure you don't use steam. We don't want that paper getting soggy. We just want to really hold that in place nicely. Now I'm gonna peek underneath like I'm looking for a surprise, and I'm gonna find that next line on step 3 and fold there as well. Nice fold. Again, that's just gonna give me a visual representation where that next piece needs to go. Overlap it by 1/4 of an inch and just do the same thing again. Now it doesn't look like much yet, but I need to trim it, and that's where we see the magic of paper piecing come out. So when I flip it over, I need to make sure that I'm trimming on the dotted line because that is gonna be the seam allowance. If I cut it on here, it's not gonna work out great. I'm not gonna tell you how I know that. Let's just say a friend told me that one time. And I'm gonna trim around all 4 sides. Now this is a great task for an older rotary blade or one that you know that's on its way out. And then when I flip it over, there we go. That's exactly what I want to see. That point, that 1/4 inch seam allowance, this is looking great. And you know what? Some days you just need perfect points to make it feel good. Now what I'm going to do is finish up 3 more of these for the stars of my paper pieced block. But remember, if you want more in-depth tips and tricks, you can check out that bonus video that we have for you. Just check out the description box below. Turns out purple isn't so bad. It's kind of getting used to it, but I did take a break from the purple and go with a little bright yellow. And so these are gonna be the paper piece points of my star block, and this will be the points of my second block. But I'm gonna stick these aside for now, and I'm gonna keep these out because I gotta work on the center of my star before I can move on. So the center is going to use this square and a stitch and flip technique to make a square in a square. And what I'm gonna do is on the back of all these little ones is draw a line diagonally from corner to corner. I have to admit, I'm kind of missing the purple a little bit. That's okay, I think my drink will get me through. So what I'm gonna do here is lay my little square on the bigger square in a corner so that the diagonal line aims towards the middle of the side. I'm gonna stitch directly on that line. And I'm gonna cut 1/4 of an inch outside that line. We know I love the stitch and flip technique. I use it in a lot of the Midnight Quilt Show quilts. And I'm gonna press that back, and you can see I'm starting to get that point right there. And I could use an iron, but I'm gonna use my seam roller, and I'm gonna do the same on all 4 sides of my square. Now I'm gonna give this a press to make it lay flat, and then I'm ready to assemble my block. So the center of the block is gonna go right there, and then our paper piece blocks are gonna form the points of our star. But no block is complete without purple. That's right, we've come to terms. We're like BFFs now, best friends. Now these purples are gonna go right here. And I didn't show you how to make these half square triangles. I make them a lot in these episodes and I didn't wanna bore you with them. But I used your regular technique, and what happens here is a beautiful yellow and beautiful purple block. Now all I have to do is sew these together in rows and then sew the rows together and I have a block. Sewing a traditionally pieced block to a paper piece block is very easy. I'm just gonna put them right sides together as I normally would, but I'm actually gonna sew from the paper side because I already have my seam allowance on there. I'm gonna stitch directly on that line. That just helps keep me on the right track. Perfection. And so even where I have a point coming to a point, I'm still gonna sew from that paper piece side and make sure those points line up nicely, and that's gonna make them look real good. All right, and that first block is finished. Now I'm gonna do the same with the second block with just some different colors. So the second block has the same points, the same block, just different colors, and it has these 4 patches around the outside. And again, I didn't show you those because they're pretty easy to go together. Now, what I am really excited about is the quilting part, because see where these come together and make this diamond shape? I have a fun design planned for that, but you'll have to wait to see what happens there. Now, I've got a few more blocks to make for this quilt, so I'm gonna do that, and I'll be right back and show you how it looks when it's all laid out. I feel like I'm pretty much a paper piecing professional at this point because I've got all the blocks done for the first row. I want to show you what this is looking like. So there's that first one, my beautiful purple block. That's right, it's beautiful. I'm loving it. Who knows, I might actually order purple fabric for my shop now. Maybe. Now, I have all the blocks done and I have to sew them together, but all the blocks still have their paper on the back. Now, when it comes to ripping off the paper, you can do it a couple different ways. You can rip it off a little at a time, or wait till the whole thing is assembled and rip it off all at once. It's always best if you have family members that could help out with that. Do you think it would be bad if I woke my kids up to rip out the papers? I mean, I've already lost my Mom of the Year award. I don't know. I'll be right back. Night, Mommy loves you. Okay, all my blocks are done. Gonna lay them back out and get this thing sewn together. The first row is finished, and it just so happens I have the second row done as well. And this is the best part about putting together a quilt, because this is where you finally get to see those secondary patterns happening. And here you can see how that purple makes this almost lattice work. You can see where these blues come together and make the diamonds, where I'm going to do something really fun in those. Now, this is a great basic paper piecing pattern, but if you want something a little bit more intricate, or you're wanting to get some more tips, then you can watch all the paper piecing classes you want on Craftsy using their free membership trial. Details are below, so make sure you check that out. This beautiful quilt is finished. Not only is the paper piecing looking pretty good, but I'm kind of digging the purples and that curvy illusion. It's so nice that this quilt doesn't have any borders, because that means I'm ready to quilt. I don't think it does have borders. Oh, never mind, it has 3 borders. Wow, not 1, not 2, but 3. Okay, I wonder if the kids went back to sleep yet. No, I'm not gonna wake them up again. This quilt is gonna get 1 purple border right here, because you know what's better than some purple? More purple. And then a skinny blue border, because who doesn't love sewing a long seam for just 1.5 inches border? That wasn't sarcasm. And the icing on this purple cake is this beautiful purple border. So 3 borders on all 4 sides, and then I'll finally be ready for the machine quilting. Oh, I better get to it. Okay, I have to admit, I've been drinking the purple Kool-Aid and I'm now a purple fan. Not so much that I'm gonna start wearing purple clothes or dyeing my hair purple, but I'm definitely loving it in this quilt, and I'm even gonna use it in this contrasting fabric. Ooh, I'm a little nervous, but we'll see how it turns out. What I'm gonna quilt in these diamonds is a design I like to call the Plume Feather, and this was in my very first quilting book, and I love how it's going to extend and fill in this whole area, but come back to where it starts. I'm gonna go ahead and see what it looks like. I sure hope it turns out as nice as it looks in my head. So I'm gonna go ahead and start quilting it in this diamond with my purple thread. And I'm gonna end in a swirl. But when I come back out, I'm gonna come out to a point and really extend it out into the top of that diamond. I really want to fill that whole space. So wavy line into a swirl, up to a point, and then I'm gonna work my way back down, quilting those same fern-like serpentine lines. Extend it out, and then back. Extend it out, and back. And working my way all the way back down to the bottom, quilting those shapes. Once I get to the bottom, I need to do the same on the other side, so I'm gonna echo my way back up to the top and then do those same ferns. And as I start to run out of room, I'm just gonna work my way back to that point where I started so I can move on to the next part of my block. What I have here is a plume feather that perfectly fills that block. It starts and stops at the same place, and that means it's nice and efficient. I can go ahead and go right into the next part of my block, which I'm gonna go ahead and do right now. In this 4 patch right here, I'm gonna do some continuous curve quilting, where I just go from point to point quilting a curved line. And what it's gonna help me do is quilt this whole block so I can move on. And there, that 4 patch is nice and finished. To move on to the next part of the block, I would just stitch along my seams and continue on quilting. Now this is what I like to call up all night quilting. It's a little bit more custom, a little bit more complex. But if it seems too overwhelming, I want you to check out some free quilting diagrams that I put together for you. You can learn how to download them by checking out the description below. And since you're gonna be down there anyway, you might as well go ahead and subscribe to the Midnight Quilt Show. If up all night quilting isn't your kind of thing, don't worry. I know you might not love machine quilting as much as I do. I have a turn in early version where you can have an easier quilting option with those quilting diagrams, so be sure to check that out. You can download those in the description box below. Well, I'm gonna finish quilting plume feathers and continuous curves. I'll be back real quick to show you what it looks like when it's all done. After making this quilt, I feel like I can say I'm the perfect purple paper piecer that ever paper pieced a purple quilt. I don't know how you would say it, but all I know is I'm finally over my dislike of purple. I feel like cementing it with that purple thread and using that in the quilting was the right call, even though it's nice and contrasting. And you too can be a perfect paper piecer with the bonus video we put together and Craftsy's free trial membership where you can watch all the paper piecing classes. Now be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any episodes of the Midnight Quilt Show, and thanks so much for joining me.